evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are watching from in the world. Welcome back to a new episode of Social Confoes. I'm your host, Diego, together with my co host, Jean-Luc. Jean-Luc, we are on a trip, but before we continue on this trip, quick announcements. We are on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube at youtube.com/@Confoes, follow or subscribe there. We're also on Instagram at Confoes. And most importantly, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at confoes.substack.com. Jean-Luc, last week we
Awesome.
were on a trip. We covered some basic
Well,
topics.
we
We
barely started.
we, we
We
set
were
the stage
just,
basically.
we set the
Uh,
stage.
can you
We
quickly
discussed,
summarize for the
yeah,
people who
okay.
missed that? If you've missed last week's episode, check that out first. But this is just a quick summary of what we talked about, and then we'll continue.
So last week we first talked about going on trip, different reasons why you would go on trip. We talked about experiences while traveling. We also talked a little bit on how to prepare for the trip. So last week we started with where do we want to go? And then, of course, what do you need to prepare long in advance and why would you want to do that? Diego also gave us some tips on how to find the best flight. So if you haven't checked that one out, make sure to do. And where we're standing now is that we've just decided, okay, we've paid for our flights, our tickets. We've kind of just discussed accommodation. And what we get a little bit more into the practical stuff. So, Diego, when you go on a trip, do you prefer the traditional route or the new route? And here's what I mean with the tradition. We already kind of talked about travel agents and booking uh, through somebody else, which we both rarely do. But then you get to the point of finding an accommodation and also figuring out the travel logistics within the destination that you're going to. Let's start with the accommodation. Airbnb.
Five
It's the
years
new thing.
ago,
Yeah.
it was the new thing 5 years ago. 5 years
Okay.
ago, I would say yes. But nowadays, nah. Okay, nowadays, overrated. Maybe
Oh,
some
so
locations still
enlighten us.
underrated.
Enlighten us.
Yeah.
Why is it overrated?
So we're talking about accommodation, right? We got our flights and going into practicals. Before we even go into Airbnb or a hotel or booking.com or whatever you may use, it's important to know where, in what general area, in what neighborhood you want to be in. Then you can
Yeah.
start looking in that region. Why is that important? You asked about logistics, right? Uh, because once you're at your destinations, how are you going to go around? Are you going to find a cheap accommodation that's kind of in the outskirts of the city where you have barely any public transportation and you need to take an Uber that costs $15 to go to where city life is? Or do you pay a bit more and be closer to the city, but you're in walking distance from 10 restaurants, five neighborhoods, two events, right?
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
kind of decisions you got to make. But coming back
Okay.
to your question on Airbnb, why it's overrated, why I find it overrated nowadays. And this may be due to, or maybe it's more common in the Western space. I
Yeah.
don't know how it is in the East or the rest of Latin America, but I'm basing this off of experience in the US and Europe.
Okay.
So 5 years ago, 6 years ago, Airbnb was pretty cool. You can find affordable, lovely family has a nice basement where they rent out, and you can book that. Did that in Germany with a friend. Lovely neighborhood, uh, lovely family. You got that warm. But as time progressed, it has gotten more businessy. It has gotten more corporate. Okay, maybe corporate's not the right word, but more homeowners or renters have taken advantage or misused the system. So you may see an Airbnb of maybe $40, $50 per night, right?
Then you have
And
the
that's
cleaning
listed.
fee.
When you
Then
search,
you have the
that's
cleaning
listed.
fee. Yeah.
And then once you start go to the booking page, as you mentioned, you have the cleaning fee, $25. So, and
Yeah.
then I think there's one more, a service fee or something,
Service
depending
fee,
on,
you have tourist tax.
yeah,
Sometimes
tax is
they
also,
don't add the taxes that they have to pay to the city. They don't add
yeah,
them beforehand, so they add
like
them after
that was
that.
an
Yeah.
issue, but a lot of states have added
Yeah.
tax as well because
Yeah.
it's an income. And then you go to the checkout, and then the price is almost double of what of the listing price. So it's kind of at first glance misleading advertising. And when you compare that to a comparable hotel or something similar, it's the same price and sometimes more expensive. So that's what I've observed in last 2 3 years with Airbnb. It isn't
And
the
now you're getting the
lucrative.
other way around as well. I do want to mention that you also now have family-owned hotels, which aren't necessarily as Airbnbs, but they use a similar system where everything is already pre-planned. So you basically get all your codes and everything in advance, and you don't even see like a front desk or anything, which kind of feels like an
Yeah,
Airbnb because you can still send a WhatsApp to that person, but you don't even have to be in contact with that person if you don't want to, but it's still a legit hotel. So it's kind of going the other way. So it's kind of the Airbnbs are coming more professional and more business driven, whereas the hotels, some of them are also becoming more like authentic and more
yeah, self-service.
towards,
And
yeah, self service. Yeah.
but yeah, I do. If it's someplace I'm used to going. So coming back to the original question,
Yeah.
accommodation, right? You asked about
Yeah.
Airbnb. The first thing I would say, do you have any friends in that location? That's the best accommodation you can have. If someone's there that can accommodate you, you
That's the
know,
best.
that's the best thing. When I go to the Netherlands, most of the times I stay for free.
Yeah.
Two,
For
3 days.
me, so here's the interesting part, and this is also why I changed my travel schedule the last time I was in the Netherlands. Because previously, if I went, all my friends would have a spare bedroom.
Yeah, I get that.
And now when I go,
That spare
they
bedroom
have
is already
children.
filled.
They have children.
Yep.
And even if they allow me to stay, it's still kind of a hassle with the children and them being there.
Yes.
So yes, if I stay for a night and I wake up
In
when the
your
children are to
20s,
school
if you're still in
and
your
the children
20s,
are to school, it's fine. But still, you feel a certain discomfort.
yeah,
And uh, even though it's weird because we have a spare bedroom as well, and we have people that stay over, and the children actually they don't mind it at all. But I can still imagine though that I feel it's more of a hassle than it used to be, especially when my friends have children. So I
yeah,
prefer actually to stay in a hotel. We even did a Airbnb as well, a previous visit. And that's personally for me. I think the Airbnb is an advantage when you're with a big group.
yes.
Because if you're a group of
Basically,
six or
if you
eight,
can rent a complete apartment, a house,
yeah,
basically, then it makes
yeah,
sense. But if
yeah.
you're
If
with
you're a group
two,
with
three,
six
four
of eight,
people,
then it makes
yeah,
sense. But if you're two, you can get a king suite like at a reasonable price now as well. But then you get to an important part, which you mentioned, which I do want to get into. Where is it located?
yes,
Because aside from maybe Europe, where especially Western Europe, the public transport is really good.
yes, yes,
Aside from Western Europe, if you're in the middle of the city, you're fine. If you're in the outskirts of the city, you need your own car.
hmm,
Like if you're in a big city, talking Rio, Los Angeles, New York, Amsterdam, London, Paris, and then even if you go to the bigger Asian cities, which I'm careful because for me it's still tricky. But at least the public transport is really, really good and walking everywhere as long as you stay on the main roads. it's pretty damn safe for tourists. But if you're on the outskirts of the town or of the city, or if a little bit into the periphery, you need a car. And in the U.S., especially if you're going to the eastern states, I feel yeah, you need a car.
Yeah, most places you need a car. So that's the
Yeah,
other
you
thing
need a
that
car.
goes into tandem with deciding your accommodation. How are you gonna commute? Like, do the things you want to do, are they within reach, uh, or do you want to be central and then use the car to go to the outskirts? So
Yeah.
that's the other thing you do in the consideration. But what do you
So
prefer? Do you prefer
yeah,
public transportation or like taking a taxi or renting a car?
so like most of the like especially the Western countries, Ubers are quite good, right?
Yeah,
Um, if you're going to a here's how I feel about this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. If you're going somewhere for the first time, especially in a country where you've never been before, having a planned trip really isn't that bad.
I agree.
Right? If you're going to a brand new, like I went to Cuba, for instance, and it was planned. Oh, that was heaven. Everything was planned. I got my itinerary. I knew what day where I was going. We were guided. It was awesome, and it makes me much more comfortable if I would go again. That I at least have an idea what I can fall back on. Whereas if you're going for the first time, you have to figure out everything for yourself. And even cities where you think like they're big, like if you're not really in the middle of the city, like the core center of the city, even the bigger cities are like can get messy when it comes to public transport, even in Western cities,
Yes,
kind of countries as well. So, like, if you go somewhere for the first time, if it's an organized trip, please take the organized trip. And then once you've been there before and you go for a second time, you already kind of have a know and a feel. You already know whether there's Uber or Lyft or something similar to it. You kind of know how long the public transportation runs, what time you have to be out of the certain parts of the city. That's important to know as well. Like there's certain areas of the city that are planned for day. You can go there by day, but don't go there by night.
exactly.
So those kind of things, when you know those kind of things, then you can plan. And then when you're really familiar with it, I do like driving personally. So I do like having a car. That's something that I've gotten used to. But yeah, even in the most civilized public transport countries in the world, at the end of the day, a car makes you more flexible because you just can't get more done with a car.
Mm.
That's just the reality.
So coming back to that, I agree with you on that part. Like for the first time, familiarize yourself
Or have
with
a
it
friend
first.
with a car that lives there. That's probably the best one.
Yeah, the friend.
Yeah.
If you have a friend
Yeah.
there for
If you
accommodation,
have a friend,
transportation,
that's probably always the
that's the
best.
best thing.
Yeah.
That's the best thing. But
Yeah.
if you're on your own, we're talking about
Yeah.
you're planning a trip, maybe with some friends, but it's the first time you guys are going there.
Yeah.
Coming back to the location, decide on usually when I decide on a location, if we're talking about in the city, you talked about public transport. I either look how close is it if they have a metro system, like is it within walking distance? Is there a supermarket nearby or a mall nearby that's within walking distance? Because then you can
Then you're
always do
good.
some
Yeah.
emergency shopping or whatever you need if you happen to need something. And then
I don't like
activities.
grocery shopping. I don't like grocery shopping with public transport though. I have to be honest. I don't
That's,
like
that's why I
if I
say
live there.
walking
No, if I
distance.
live there. No, if I live there. So here's also another thing. If you live somewhere, if you're gonna stay there for 3 to 6 months or longer, it's totally fine because people will adapt to you, will see you, and the locals will kind of, after a week already, kind of understand that you're there for a longer period. And interestingly enough, even in the most individualistic countries, if you're staying somewhere, the neighborhood kind of watches out for you unintentionally sometimes. But if I'm just somewhere for a week or for a short amount of time, I don't like doing combining groceries with public transport. I don't. I personally don't.
Yeah, it's a safety thing that you have to take
Yeah,
into consideration. That's why if the supermarket's like right next door, you need an
yeah.
emergency bread or something or a quick snack, you can go in and out within a few minutes. That
I,
that's
I have
that's the emergency.
I have friends. I have friends that if we don't rent our own car, they have like one mandatory trip on the first day,
Smoke.
and then is find a Walmart, take an Uber to the Walmart, stack up, take a Uber back. That's like a mandatory trip. Like, but that's the U.S. based, and I think in the Netherlands it would be a little different, and in other European countries, I think we would approach it differently as well. I think in European countries, we always look for like a supermarket or a grocery shop in the vicinity, like within the same street or one or
Yeah.
two blocks max. That's kind of, we always want to kind of prep that. And it's interesting to see whether or not that's something that you would now do, because I think 10, 15 years ago, you would just go and figure that out when you're there. And I feel now
Mm.
with Google and everything, you probably plan that ahead as
Yeah, you,
well.
you can plan that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I even put marks on the
yeah,
map, I pin
yeah.
them
If you
like
just
points
feel
of
like,
interest.
hey,
What's
we
the
had that
distance?
actually my last vacation with my wife. We had Nafmi, which is like a really, really good map for if you're driving, and Google Maps. But we sometimes have to use Google Maps because everywhere we wanted to go was pinned on Google Maps.
Yeah.
But the quality of Google Maps navigating, also Nafmi gives like the speed limits of all the roads, and it's
Google
just
Maps
better
actually
navigate.
also. Like,
Yeah, but it's much better navigated in general.
yeah. But
So
give it a few months or
yeah,
years and it will be acquired by.
yeah, it
That's
will
what
be
happened to
probably,
Waze, and then it's got
probably,
integrated into the
yeah,
base Google Map.
probably.
Yeah, coming
But
back
yeah,
to
I
that,
think
and
that's yeah.
so for me, I actually don't mind driving. I feel pretty comfortable driving either left lane or right lane abroad, but I do prefer being brought around.
Yeah,
Not driving
I
myself. I would rent a car, but it's also just to enjoy the view and the scenery.
yeah, it really depends on how often you go.
Exactly.
I think I feel like the more
So
often you go, the more likely you'll be like, hey, for me
yeah,
personally, I want
once
to
you're
drive.
familiar with it, then
Yeah,
it's fine.
yeah.
Because I went to Curacao once with a friend. We were in Willemstad, like center.
Oh yeah. So that's funny. Curacao, I actually drove the first time. No, it wasn't the first time I was there. But the first time I was old enough to drive, I actually drove. I must say that's an island. I mean, it's not that
Yeah,
much traffic.
it
There are
can
not that
can't
many roads.
can't go wrong. But
It's
basically, we
no.
walk. We were
Yeah,
like, okay, let's find a place to rent. What's in the city? We're
yeah,
like, okay, let's compare it to somewhere else. So we used Google Maps, and that kind of brought us astray. It was 2017, wasn't as accurate back then yet. So we ended
yeah,
up in I think it's Mambo Beach, all the way
yeah.
there by walking. So we walked for 2 hours
Like
straight or
what?
something. And then we took a taxi bus back, and we were
Oh
back in the
wow.
city like 5 minutes
Oh
ago.
wow. Oh
Shit.
wow.
So the next
Yeah,
day, we
what's
just rented a car in the city, and then we drove from one edge of the island to the other edge of the island just for fun.
that was good. That's good. There's a
But
really good beach at the other edge of the island. I
yes,
don't know if
we
you were
stopped at a
there.
beach. I had my drone, took a swim,
Yeah, yeah.
went to
No,
the
there's a really
lighthouse.
there are really pretty beaches, but then there's one specific beach there where they feed the sea turtles, and the
Mm,
sea turtles come in bunches, and you can actually swim next to them, and they're
yeah, yeah,
unbothered because they're used to it. So
yeah.
that's insane. But yeah, Curacao is not that. I must say one of the things that does.
I don't like driving in downtown areas when it's too much traffic.
Oh,
I don't
I
mind
don't.
driving, to outskirts, to a beach or a
Oh
park or
no, I don't
somewhere.
mind that at all. I don't mind that at all. What I don't mind is like we're a flat country. So there's
Oh,
one
like
specific
hills.
bridge in Curacao that goes up, 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 up,
Yeah.
very steep. But then of course you have the turnpike in the US and like really high roads. I'm not a big fan of heights. So those kind of roads are like it's not necessarily that I get scared or anything, but I'm just it takes more energy to drive on those roads than it takes on the flat roads for me personally. So
Mm,
when I'm on a turnpike or a highway, I just have to concentrate more than I would have to concentrate on just flat surface. So I think that's the only major difference. I'm not sure I would drive in the mountains in Europe, like going like in the Pyrenees in France, especially to winter sport locations. Like,
oh, that can get dangerous if it's
yeah,
icy roads.
I'm not
I've
sure.
felt icy roads. Like,
Yes, yeah, I'm not sure I feel comfortable. I think it would be similar for people to drive in the countryside, in the savannah in Suriname. Like you would have to know what to do and how to like
yeah.
maneuver in certain situations. So no, that's something that I would be more careful with. Um,
Okay.
and then I want to go to the next thing. How do you
I
prep
actually
for
have
countries? Yeah, you want to do more
actually
logistics?
one more logistic.
Okay.
Like, we've got the flight tickets, we've got the accommodation. We have decided on how we're gonna go around. Like, walking, public transportation, or car. How do you pack?
Oh, okay.
What do you bring?
Okay. Okay. This really depends who I'm with and what the goal of the vacation is. If I'm on a vacation where I need to bring stuff back home, I go all out. So it's suitcase within a suitcase. Like the children are small, so they don't need their suitcase. So we put their suitcase in one and another suitcase. We travel. We travel with 50 kilos. We come back with 100. So those kind of things, right? If I travel for business and I stay less than a week, I could probably, and I don't have to bring a lot back or nothing back.
Mhm.
I can travel with a carry-on.
Yeah, for me,
And,
I
and
can.
that's really easy. If you're traveling with a carry-on, I mean, the last time I traveled to a carry-on only, I was out of the airport before the business class.
You're like, yeah,
That's the best thing.
like
That's really the best thing.
airports flights with carry on only is like
That's heaven sent.
easy. Yeah.
That's
So
really heaven sent.
for me as well, like carry on, I can manage with carry on stuff for about a week. I can push it to 10 days maybe, and
No,
with
I'm
some
a week
room to
max.
spare for small stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's how I usually, if I can, I always opt for carry on only. And if required, then I can purchase a bigger thing. But usually there's not a lot of stuff to bring back, and especially if you're solo. If you're family, yeah, I get it. But even
Again,
then, you
if
save
you're
a lot.
traveling solo, and there's like so much, you can't lose your luggage. That's like one of the most important
That's
things. But the
so
second thing is how quickly, how insanely quickly you move from one place to another. The only
so
thing is, some flights in the US get so crowded that they actually
yeah,
um,
the
they
carry on
offer to
compartments
yeah
are
yeah
full,
they
and
offer
then
to your carry-on to be as checked baggage,
but then
which if
they'll
you're traveling, yeah.
they'll still put the carry on back at the gate for you as the first
No,
to
no,
pick
not
it up.
always, not always, not
Uh,
always.
I've experienced that
More
at least.
recently, No, more recent. No, but if you take it in, yes. If you take it in its full, yes. But if you preemptively kind of say like, okay, it's
Oh
fine, I
no,
can check it,
no, no, no,
they check it. Yeah,
no,
yeah.
no. Only
I-
I only I bring it in, and if it's full, then they have no
then
choice,
go.
right?
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
No. Okay. So that definitely
but
that
one tip,
how you
if you have
travel.
yeah, if you have checked baggage and a carry-on, always have a spare of set clothing in your carry-on. Always, if you're traveling
Yes.
with carry-on and checked baggage, because even though the chance is small, there's a chance that your checked baggage get lost or mislabeled and it's on another flight, and you have to wait a few days before you get it, or it gets completely lost. At least you'll have something to fall back on emergency, and you can buy some stuff. But always have something in your carry-on that you can use.
Yep. So, and I put clothes in my carry-on that I don't want to lose. That's kind of like
Yeah, like basically all
either if it's a new set of clothing or something that I
your
find like I want to.
valuables should be in
Yeah.
your carry-on. Don't
Yeah.
put anything that you could you would feel bad about losing in your checked-in baggage. That's just one of the
Okay.
rules of packing. And
Okay.
I add to that, like I try to pack a lightweight clothing as well that folds small. Like I've when I've been shopping for myself in the recent years, I've been also intentional of like what I buy, like how does it pack, how fast does it dry. So if you need a quick wash, should dry within
It needs
overnight.
to dry quickly and it doesn't need that much ironing. If it needs
Exactly.
ironing, it's out.
Yeah.
That is just yes. Okay. So the last thing before we go on the actual trip, when traveling to a country that does not speak English, or traveling to a country with a foreign
Uh,
language
yeah,
where you
that you
know
don't
that the
know.
local population is not very known for being able to speak English as well. How do
Yeah,
you go
so
about that?
I download Google Translate. I have it
Okay.
downloaded.
Yeah.
I pre-download the language, the local language, so offline for offline translations. In
Okay.
this case, for South America, for Brazil, it would be Portuguese, and the rest of the country
Mhm.
Spanish. I would, if you don't know the phrases, you know, 1, 2, 3, or look up most common phrases that you would use, asking for directions, asking for where something is, and then pre-populate it in your translate so you have a quick reference. That's one way
Okay.
to translate. And if you have internet, Wi-Fi, or we could go into that as well in a second, but it's also very convenient now. You can just speak it in and then it live translated. So it isn't as daunting anymore as it was 5, 10 years ago to go into a foreign, even with
Or 20.
signs. Yeah, even with signs and directions,
Yeah.
the translate apps does wonders. You can just point and translate it, and you can get the general gist of it. So that's one of the go-to things I would recommend: Google Translate or some other translating app. I don't know others, but Google Translate basically is your
Okay.
best friend in such a situation.
Okay. So now we're going on a trip. When you leave your home, I have like a three check system: my wallet, my keys, and my phone.
Passport, passport.
No, no, no. For just leaving home, if I go out of my house, my
Oh yeah,
keys, my
yeah. I have
wallet,
that.
my
Yeah, I have that same
yeah,
system. Keys,
yeah.
wallet, phone.
That's
Yeah,
keys, wallets, phone, wallet, phone. That's basically the three checks for a man. A woman has a whole purse with everything else in it. We won't even dive into that. How comparable is your check system for a flight? Do you have a, 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 a check system for when you travel and you fly? And if you do that check, you're like, nothing can go wrong.
the most important thing is the passport. Actually, almost once lost my passport during security. You have to take out
Oh,
everything.
yeah.
You have to take out everything, go to the scanner, etc. So I
Mm.
was repacking my bag, etc. And then I took 5 steps and I didn't feel it, and it fell in the bin because I put it in a pocket.
Oh,
So luckily it was right there. I noticed it immediately because
yeah,
that's pre-programmed. Those are the checks I do, right? Wallet, keys, phone. But I
yeah,
had passport to that.
yeah.
So wallet, key, phone, anything that you need to take out of your pocket. And I would say passport and phone. And no, yeah, those three are most important.
Phone.
Basically, you replace the key with the passport.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. You can store your keys away somewhere and the keys uh get swapped by the passport. Yeah. So wallet, passport, phone. Yeah. I think that would be, and I also triple check my passport through every process of the airport.
Yes, if it's like
Yeah.
stamped, is it everything? Because that's your identity. That's your proof of that everything's fine. And most importantly, for my phone, I always have a spare battery as well, like something like this.
Yeah.
That's just emergency because everything's on my phone. And if I need a quick charge and you don't have wall outlets, access to wall outlets, or they're all used, you can charge it
Okay.
quickly.
Next
Then
chat.
comes the next one for me.
No.
Or
Okay. Are you still on the airport or no?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
When do you get a mode of telecommunication? And I'm not talking about Wi-Fi, but
I get it
mobile.
at the I get it at the airport when I land. So unless you get it earlier, we can discuss it then.
So that's what I used to do, or sometimes I didn't even get it if I knew
Yeah.
it was a big city and there's Wi-Fi everywhere. But going somewhere more unknown, I actually opt in for eSIMs now.
Yeah. I
I
have to
opt in for
say,
eSIM and get a like data plan, just a data plan eSIM. So
and you get it
moment you land,
beforehand already.
yeah, it produces and gets
That's
activated,
interesting.
and then you have internet, and then you can just use your phone because callings, WhatsApp, and get updated. And if you need to order an Uber, you can just do it on the street. You don't need to go
How
hog
many
Wi-Fi,
eSIMs
etc.
can you add to your phone?
It depends on the phone, but basically, from my understanding how eSIMs work, you just deactivate the active one and activate. So they're all stored in your phone once you.
So there's
Uh,
no limit on how many eSIMs you can have.
there's a limit to how many can be active at once.
Yeah. Okay. That's
So depending
probably,
on the
I
phone,
think, two.
if you have a dual SIM
Yeah.
phone, you can have two SIMs active
Yeah.
at once. So two data plans, right? Or two carriers.
Yeah.
But it's basically just data. Once it's registered to the phone, you just deactivate it and activate it.
I think the eSIM is a lifesaver
Yes.
because I would lose my SIM cards like crazy. And then every time I would have to get a new one, and every time I had to get a new purchase. And this is the thing that I'm happy that you mentioned that you do the eSIM before you leave because, first of all, it's really expensive at the airport.
Yes.
But
SIM card, like you can get a data plan SIM card for around $20 for a week, 5 gigs. That's more than enough.
yeah, but it's
Like,
really hard to find eSIMs for certain countries at the moment. Like the bigger countries, yeah, they already have that system figured out. But it's sometimes really hard to find.
actually, the one I found covers whole Latin America.
Oh, that's
So,
interesting.
yeah.
But you
I
pay a fixed
forgot the
fee per
name.
month?
No, you just pay for you set the time you're gonna how long you want it, 7 days, 2 weeks, and
Yeah.
then you pay for I think 5 gigs, depending on how many gigabytes you
Okay,
want.
so that's the data thing that I'm uncomfortable with. But yeah, still you can re-up it. It's fine.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
it's basically just prepaid internet like we're using here. I think you use
Yeah.
postpaid, but I still use prepaid for local, so I see that as the same.
Okay, that's a really good one. But eSIM is definitely a game changer for sure. So then we get to the airport lounge. Do you ever use the airport lounge?
What do you mean with lounge? The private area, you mean?
Yeah. Do you ever pay like in Suriname for the Sabaku lounge or in other countries that you grade up to have some privacy or even a airport lounge with a shower or just more private and more a little bit privacy,
I've
but also
never
the
had
experience,
the
drinks.
yeah, I've never had the need for it or the okay, I've had long layovers, but that was kind of, extreme. But preemptively, I've never had the need to it. I always try to book flights with short layovers, like 2 hours.
Yeah.
One other thing I would like to add when booking flights, multiple flights with layover, that I've added to my checklist is if there's more flights per day, I always try to book a flight so that there's an extra flight in between, just
In
in case
case you
something
miss. Yes.
happens with that flight, it gets
Yeah.
canceled or delayed. You can still get the next flight, so your whole itinerary doesn't get screwed.
Yeah.
But yeah, airport
We
lounges.
actually,
No,
yeah.
I haven't had the need for it. But do you have any hacks or tips or things?
Yeah, it's good to see whether or not an airport has a good airport lounge. Sometimes it's not worth it, but more often than like there's certain airport lounges you can only get in when you are a member. Those are a little bit difficult, but often airports have some good lounges that are free for everyone. And if you're like a light traveler and you travel um, really light and you don't want any expenses, it's almost never worth it. But if you have long layovers or you can get an airport lounge on the cheap, it sometimes is quite interesting. I think we even did an episode of Social Confoes when I was in an airport lounge,
Yeah,
which just goes a little bit easier than when you're just in the main terminal. So, and that airport lounge supposedly had its own shower, but it wasn't working at the time. So that was a little bit of a bummer.
mhm.
But airport lounges take away any cost that you would have for food and drinks. So I think that's a very important thing.
I think that's a good tip. Yeah,
So
for long
so
layover,
if
longer
you're yeah,
layovers.
so if you're having a long layover and also you're know that the airport is really expensive when it comes to food and drinks. Sometimes you just have airports where water is like $4, and you know you're gonna eat anyway. Um, you can check it out. It's not always a win. If there's an airport which has a really good food court, I'm probably not gonna use an airport lunch. If the food
Mhm.
court's good, I'm gonna sit at least 2 3 hours there at the food court, so I'm good. I don't need anything else. I can perfectly do it. But if it's like a long layover, I've experienced layovers of like longer than 12 hours. Oh yeah, you do need a lunch for that.
Yeah, or you just get out, get a hotel room, or some have in
If
hotel.
if that's possible though,
Yeah, if
if
it's
that's
possible. Yeah,
possible,
and it's
yeah. And then also if you get out, I've considered this one of my recent trips. I considered it. I was like, no, it's too expensive. I wanted to do it, but it was like, nah, we're not gonna do this because it's just actually too. We tried to book. What did we end up doing? This is an interesting one. All the hotels nearby were full,
mm,
so like I was calling like for 40 minutes trying to find a reasonably priced hotel room outside of, and
the
there were
airport. Yeah,
like on Google, they were like, yeah, get a day room with us. All those day rooms weren't available. I was like, screw it. We're gonna save the money. We're gonna do something awesome with it. And that's what we ended up doing. Yeah. So we just roamed around for a little longer and in the end, it was okay. And I usually don't like, for instance, Miami Airport because Miami Airport
Oh,
is cold, insanely cold. So you don't want to have a layover where you come in Miami like 5
so
a.m.,
thing
4:30
I
in the
always
morning. Yeah,
one thing I always have with me is a jacket.
yeah, but even with the jacket, it's like Miami is like you're inside and you feel like you're in a freezer and you walk out and you're like, wait, why? Why is this? Like it's one of the most insane airports. But okay, then we
Okay.
get to the next part. Seating in the plane. How much research do you do for your seating in the plane?
I oftentimes don't really care. I just go with whatever I can get. If it's a long flight, I prefer an aisle seat. Sometimes access to bathroom, etc. If it's a shorter flight, I prefer a window seat. And if it depending on time of day. So,
Never a
but
window, never a middle seat? No, just kidding.
no, no. I do have to say, if a hack there, if you want more leg room, volunteer for the emergency exit
Yeah.
seats.
The emergency exit is a really good one. The worst seat is the row in front of the emergency exit because you
Ye-
can't you can't recline your seat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's the worst row. Also, try to avoid seats near the lavatories. Those
Yeah,
are terrible
that's
seats.
you always hear the
Yeah.
flushing and everything.
There is one major hack that you should always consider. Always look at the floor plan of the airplane that you're flying with. Yes, that's
Okay.
an important one. And once you do, if there's a seat plan where there's two seats next to each other and the next row has three seats, get the window seat on the second row.
Okay. Why?
Because some of the airplane configurations, have a two-seat uh, emergency exit
Mm-hmm.
because the emergency exit has like some kind of weird curve that there's no room for another seat there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then the seat behind it has this insane amount of leg room. So always make sure to check your seat plan of the plane that you're flying with.
Oh, that's a
Usually
good
you can
one.
usually
Yeah.
you can figure out which plane you're flying with. And if you can see it up front when you check in online or in the seat plan, you can see it. That seat is gold. So if you have like two next to each other, the emergency row, and then the next row has
The one
three,
behind it. Yeah.
take the one on the outside on the wall side.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
one
I'm
has that
gonna keep
one
that
has
one in mind.
insane. Yeah, I think a lot of American Airlines planes have it. I'm not sure about which airlines have it, but that's a really good one. And then you always have also the first seat behind the business class is a pretty damn good seat always as well.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
I usually
and
didn't pay it much attention.
and interesting, most Brazilian airlines that I've flown on have kind of comfort class in the front as well, where the seats are slightly more. You might have to pay like a couple of like $10 to $20 for those seats, and then you have to look budget wise if it's worthwhile, especially if it's a short flight. You don't really care that much, but
Yeah, it's the
that's
long
also
flights
really good.
that's
Yeah,
where it's
yeah.
kind of worth it. So last thing, yeah, one of the last things I want to cover is how do you handle money and payments? How do you prepare for that going to a destination?
Um, I always have lengthy conversations with my bank locally before I leave. And I also prep the time zones
Hmm.
so that I know whether or not my bank will be open because I feel like I have a really good bank and really good account managers. So I've been in situations where I could send them WhatsApps if there's an issue with payment and they would fix it on the spot. So that's a really good, if you have that relationship with your bank and they can help you out, that's awesome. Also, know whether or not Visa or MasterCard is the way to go for your destination because some countries are really good with
Yes.
Visa, other countries are
When
really good with
I was in
MasterCard.
Guyana, they only took Visa cards. I couldn't use my Mastercard.
Yeah. So that is it's very important to have both cards, a MasterCard and a Visa card, if you're in a position to get those. Um, I've gotten really upset at San Diego my last time I was there because we went to a football match or soccer for the U.S. Speaking audience, and the Snapdragon Stadium in San Diego is a cashless stadium,
Yeah, if you're going to more developed
and that
areas
was such
nowadays,
a hassle.
cash is trash basically.
Yeah, that was such a hassle. That really was such a hassle. But
So
I always try to diversify, and then you also have like other bank cards that are debit cards, but they certain banks in the world have just really good coverage, like
mhm.
insanely good coverage. So their debit card just works everywhere in the world,
Yeah,
and you can
usually
go
if
to and you can go to any ATM and get it out.
so on that note, you also bring cash? Like how
I
do you
always
balance
also
that?
bring cash. What I have been doing more recently or trying to do is I'll have Google Pay, but not working as fluently as I'd hoped. So for me, it's
Yeah,
debit card,
I
credit card, cash. Those are like the three things that I always try to, in one way or another, rely on.
yeah, so the
And
biggest
also taking into account, it really helps if everything is paid in advance. So if
I
your
was about to
accommodation
mention,
and
the biggest costs you're gonna have are
yeah,
tickets and accommodation
yeah,
and maybe transportation, but that's
yeah,
depending
but
on if you're
If
gonna rent
if
a car.
you're like in a Uber Lyft state
Yeah,
that or
it's
country
in
or
the app.
city,
Yeah, in the app.
it's you're good.
That's taken care of.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I usually tend to do something similar. I can't remember the last time I brought more than $500 of cash with me. I
interesting.
usually have
Yeah,
around 300 to $500 cash with me, and
and that's just for
that's just for
backup.
emergency.
Yeah, that's
And
emergency.
I've rarely had to use it, or maybe just the $20 or $50, exchange that in local currency depending on where you are, and that's just emergency. And I kind of store it in different compartments of my bag and in my wallet. That's just a safety
I'm not
issue.
gonna
Like
go into that because I don't want people to know where I store these things. But yes,
find something that works for you. And then again, yeah, if whatever I can do in my phone, if I can pre-program my cards in my phone, if you can prepay anything, do that. And then just for the incidental payments, I try to use a card, or if they have wireless payments, tap to pay, I opt in for that option. I try to minimize the amount of times I have to go into my wallet.
okay. So there are some exceptions to this rule because you are mainly talking Western countries
Yes.
with currencies that are either a
Okay.
euro or a US dollar.
I would also say do your research the country you're going to. I was surprised in Brazil at how digital and cashless they were, actually.
Yeah, but Brazil has an awesome. You know the Brazilian system and how it works.
I've heard some things not quite in depth, but I was pleasantly surprised to say the least.
So I think both China and Brazil have awesome systems when it comes to integrating cash and know your customer and knowing everything. So the Brazilian system is that good that your social security number is tied to everything. which means that the
Oh yeah, you
craziest thing I've seen is you can actually pay for food on monthly installments
yeah.
because it's so far developed, and that's why the reason why people couldn't understand why Brazil was the first country to get WhatsApp payments installed, because Brazil was just their structure
They've
was
already
just
gone
that.
through that process of
Yeah, so here's the
adding
thing:
everyone.
if you miss one of those payments in Brazil, you get blacklisted. So you never miss your down payments, because if you miss your down payments, you get blacklisted, and it's straight up connected to your social security. So you don't mess around with these kind of things. So that's why it's so well excelled as already. Um, but then also, it's really hard in certain areas of Brazil to exchange your dollars
Yes.
for local currency.
And you get a very
Terrible
unfavorable.
exchange rate.
Yes. So what
So
you can, the hack I
yeah,
found there, at least
yeah,
in Brazil, and I've done this, if you can pay with your card, do that with your MasterCard, Visa card. And oftentimes they'll ask in what currency you want to pay. Choose the local currency because the bank or the card you're
yes,
using will do
yeah.
the exchange rate. And that's a way better exchange rate than what you're going to do if you choose US dollar or euro.
So this is something, and this is something that we are quite familiar with in Suriname because we had similar experiences with inflation. But always know the formal and informal exchange
Yeah.
rates of the countries that you go to.
So if we're talking about prep work, I have trading view open. I have pre-populated the trading pairs like from where I'm going and
Yeah,
have that live what the actual exchange rate is. So
yeah, but
you have that as well.
that's still the formal exchange rate. And bet your sweet life on it, you can get more for it in local currency if you trade locally. Like
No,
Cuba, no, no, Cuba is the
Cuba. Cuba is a different
Cuba is the
story.
main, yeah,
Cuba is a
the,
different story. I'm
yeah,
talking about
yeah,
the experience I had in Brazil. No,
yeah,
that doesn't work. But Cuba is a different story.
yeah. That's very different. But also in China, you have to be careful and you have to prep it very well to make sure that you know what you're doing otherwise. But even with basic payments, and that's also, and I think that's for me the last thing when we're talking about money and traveling. Um, if there's no price tag on items for sale, you're either gonna heckle or you're just not gonna buy it, because if you buy it, you're gonna
You're
be
gonna
stressed.
overpay most of the time.
You're gonna overpay a lot. We had to figure out this the hard way in China, where we started out, I think, dividing the price by two, and then by three, and then by four. At a certain time, a certain point, we started bargaining with a price divided by five or six. And it was insane, like how much different that was. And of course, I'm talking about 20 years ago. Might be slightly different now. But also finding out where the markets are and knowing how commercialized the market is. If it's a commercialized market, oh, you're just gonna pay prime time. You're just gonna pay all the tourists. And it's good to see if all stores have the same or similar prices. That does give like a consensus, and then you're willing to pay. But if there's a lot of differences, then you really take your time to make sure that you're not overpaying somewhere.
Yeah, and I think with that being said, we've covered most of the things to prepare for when you go on a trip, like going from tickets, checking out Google Flights to your accommodation. Where do you want to stay? Like, is it favorably situated that you can walk to a supermarket, or are you gonna rent a car? Packing hacks and seating in the airplane, getting a SIM card, paying, and then once you have all that set, you prepared it all, you've arrived at your destination, then it's just going through the list of activities you planned on, or just being adventurous and go enjoy yourself.
So there will be a final episode where we'll go into our favorite activities, how we prep for those activities, and also how we document things that we do while traveling. I think this was another fun episode, but we'll be back next week for part three of Let's Go on a Trip. Anything else, Diego?
No, with that being said, subscribe to our newsletter at confoes.substack.com. We'll probably compile this into a comprehensive like travel blog or newsletter. So you have, the our perspectives, the little hacks, tips that we use to travel, and that you can use for yourself. So definitely subscribe to our newsletter at confoes.substack.com. With that being said, Chandu, close us
This
up.
was another edition of Social Confoes. See you back next week, same place, same time. Bye bye.